Okay.
Okay, so we are live. Hello, Lisa. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Monday. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having
Yes,
me.
and so for those of you who don't know Lisa, who didn't get a chance to listen to the podcast, she is she has
That's
a
okay.
popular website called Global Living, where she she kind of tells people stories, gives advice, and she also is a financial specialist. What was that the right
Financial
title?
educator,
Financial
recovering
educator
banker.
specialist. And she
Right.
has created a sort of a workbook and coaching around helping people to think about their finances before they move abroad or once they are abroad. So today we're just going to be speaking a bit more about, which we didn't get a chance to as much as I would have liked to on the podcast, about what questions we need to be asking ourselves about our finances if we're going to live in a different country, if we're going to retire there, all those different things that are important. I know none of us likes to think about managing our finances, but it is something that we all should be doing.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Well,
yeah,
thank you for having me Monday for this live. This is really
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah,
And this is National Financial Literacy Month in the US. So I'm really glad to come on and talk a little bit more about finances. As Monday said, I'm a recovering banker. I was a banker for a long
yeah,
time, mostly dealing with people with their personal finances
right.
on the retail side, people who live a global lifestyle, expats, global employees, used to bank the global employees from the top global
Yeah,
corporations as well as individuals. I've also lived abroad a couple of times. I've lived in and worked in London, lived and worked in China, lived in Vietnam. So I don't just kind of write about it and talk about it. My website is Living a Global Lifestyle. I give seminars, some free and some paid. And it all started in that I was after the last financial crisis. We have to
yeah,
think back 2008 when I
yeah,
was sitting in my flat in London and I was like, oh my God, here we are again. And people don't know what to do. So it started as, well, I'm going to write a book.
yeah,
But then I got to China after I went back to the US and I got to China, with the great firewall. Sometimes it was hard to research. So I started really just talking to expats. And they were like, well, if you haven't finished your book, could you give a talk? Could you give a seminar? So
yeah.
that's kind of how I started with that. And then actually the workbook, which I did, which I thought was going to
Yeah,
be
that's
just a,
what I wanted to ask you
yeah, the
about
workbook
next.
was
So
going
your
go ahead.
workbook is basically based off of all the experience that and the questions expats asked you over the years about their finances, and you basically help them to educate them on what they should be asking, or what
Right.
information, or what they need to know that they don't know they need to know.
Right. And that's actually very good because one of the number one questions that I started seeing a lot are how much money should I take abroad? And
Right.
people would pop out with these numbers. And I go, how can you pop out with a number if you don't know your monthly expenses, which weirdly enough, a lot of people don't know. So then I
Well, because
came up with,
I guess you don't start thinking about it. Like, you first think, I need to find a place and I can afford this much a month. And then you
right,
start, and you're not thinking about the utilities. Like, because I know in France, even if you rent an apartment, you have to pay property tax. Now in the States,
oh,
you
wow,
don't. Yeah, so
that's right.
you
That's,
and the owner. So the owner pays some
wow.
and you pay some. So you have to, if you didn't
Didn't
know
know
that,
that.
that is a huge extra expense at the end of the year to
Let me
pay
put that
that
on the
tax.
list. I'm going to put that. No, I'm going to put that for the next upgrade of the workbook. That is
Yeah,
actually a very good example. And I have a bunch of cool stuff in the workbook. Some worksheets like debt
yeah.
repayment,
Okay.
budget, tracking your expenses. But I really always break things down, right? Your journey through your expat digital nomad experience, pre-departure,
Right.
arrival in the host foreign country, and then the day that you repatriate.
Okay.
Or you just come home to recharge before you go back out to your next country. So actually, property taxes is a good one because
Yeah.
I have a checklist of what might be some prospective host
Yeah.
country expenses that
Yeah.
people don't think about.
Yeah, I think
So,
people have to really, well, from my experience from living in different countries, like even if you're renting a property, it is not the same in every country. Like you
right.
really need to know, some owners, they are obliged to make repairs. Some places there are no rules. Like this stuff is just
China,
built.
right?
Yeah, this stuff is just
Right.
built and you're on your own. And so all of these different expenses that you didn't think you were going to have because you assume that it's going to be the living expenses are going to be very similar to where you come from can be quite a shock if you're not prepared for it, right?
That's
If you have to
that's
make repairs to your apartment, if you got to paint it, if you got to pay the property tax, if you have to do all of these things that you wouldn't have budgeted for.
right. No,
You didn't
that's
know.
right. And
Yeah.
then what I also do, so I take your home country expenses that you'll still have to pay, student
Yeah.
loans, credit cards, then you add that to your prospective foreign host country expenses, and then you add in a slush fund, like
Right.
I call it slush, like 20 to 25 for
Mhm.
things like you're speaking about, or what if you're looking for a job or you're looking for new
Sure.
opportunities, networking,
Mm,
career search, things
mm,
like that. So then I add in 25 to that total. Then how much do you want to cover? Some people think 6 months is enough with COVID. I just use 12 months in the workbook
sure.
because I think that is much more doable. So that's one kind of key question. That's kind of what started the whole workbook kind of thing. People like
Right.
budget here, 5 here, 4 here.
Mm.
I went
So
to
if
Paris with $100.
so if someone's thinking about moving abroad, what are some of those questions that you think they should be asking that,
Right.
that you help them walk through in your workbook?
So I help them walk through, okay, so we talked about budgeting, so we'll kind of move on from that. Banking, I still see a lot
Sure.
of people
Yeah.
that don't know, they get to, let's use France, and then they go, oh, my bank, I don't have access to my bank in the US. They've blocked me, which is happening. A lot of banks and a lot of investment banks are blocking you if you're in a foreign country. So you want to think pre-departure, am I
Mm,
going to need a new host foreign bank? Is it going to work with my bank in the US? Am I going to have access to my US bank accounts? This is something I always say, the devil is in the details that people don't think about.
yeah, and
Other thing,
I
go ahead,
can
go
say
ahead.
one thing I can say about France. To get a bank account in France, you have to live somewhere.
Yeah, right.
Right? You have to show a bill with your name, with your address. You have to show that you work. You have to have like a contract
Mm-hmm.
or something. And I mean, there's so much documentation, and people are always so surprised at how difficult it is to get a bank
I said
account
that about
in
France,
France.
yes.
I mean, like they interview you to make sure that you're a stable enough person to have a bank account.
Mm,
The banking rules are really strict in France. Like if you go over your overdraft, they let you do that 3 times and they will close your account. They kind of don't mess around with people who don't know how to handle their money. Like in the States, if you pay the fines, you just can keep
right,
going over and going over and going over.
right.
If you bounce checks in France, if you, for some reason, something happened, that they only let that happen 1 or 2 times and they will close your
Wow.
account. So it's like what you're saying, like understanding about banking. You think opening a bank account is easy? Not in every country. I had some friends. Where are they, in Singapore or Seoul? I don't know. You have to open a bank account with your husband.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it depends on your visa. If you're on a accompanying spouse visa, or like you said, like in China, you can't, there's also, you can't open a joint bank account. So what is your spouse going to do? Or your partner? What if they're not working? And then in some countries like this, I find this a lot in Scandinavia, for whatever reason, a lot of the spouses don't work, right? So maybe they
yeah,
can't get their bank account. Their partner, who's Scandinavian, is like, no, I'm not putting your name on a bank account because I don't want that, because of FACTA, right?
right,
Foreign Account
right.
Tax Compliance Act. I don't want the
Yeah, I
US
learned about
government,
FACTA. Yeah,
right? I don't want the US government, and rightly so, knowing about my banking. I'm not a
sure.
US citizen. I'm not. so that's another thing that
And it
was kind
becomes
of,
the fear that their finances could be taxed
that's right.
now because they're married to you.
Right.
That's
Right.
the biggie. So like if
Right.
you're married to someone, they accumulated a lot of money before they even met you. That's not very interesting for them to thinking that their finances now could be
Right.
taxed by a country they never actually lived in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which brings me to another thing. I said I just got off of this seminar on taxes. International taxation, sure. Am I a tax specialist? No. Do I know more than the average person? Sure. I have a chapter in the book. Do yourself a favor
Mm.
before you move abroad, sit down with an international tax accountant who's most likely lived overseas at the bare minimum and has clientele that has what they call cross-border financial interests.
Mm.
Bring all your questions and give them some scenarios and ask them and find out, oh, what if okay, maybe you're not
My
married now, but what if,
401k, if I'm
right,
transferring my 401k, will it be taxed?
exactly, right.
Yeah.
You tell them the country you want to go to. Remember, I had sent you some information about
Yeah. Agreements.
global treaty agreements.
Yeah.
That I always tell people the number one thing is you need to look for. But you can go over the scenarios with the consultant. Well, what if I move abroad and I fall in love and I meet this person, and then next thing you know, you're like, oh, I didn't know that would be an issue. I
Yeah.
didn't know that would be a challenge. So that's another one. And same thing with investments.
Sure.
I'm seeing a lot of people have always asked about investments, but I'm seeing a lot of people with the whole, Robin Hood and options became a big thing, and some other financial products, which, by the way, number one, other countries, they don't allow you to do. They don't allow you to invest in that. So here's a couple of things, right? The whole investing for US citizens, another thing you should do is sit down with the international financial management company, financial advisors. Again, people who specialize in people who live global lifestyles,
Sure.
right?
Sure. Yeah.
And you might have to change your investment strategy when you're going abroad, right?
I think you do. I think you do.
I think
It depends on
you
how
do.
long you're going to be abroad, right? Like
Right.
if you think, you might not be coming back, that could be 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. How your investments are working for you during that time is important. And it may be more beneficial where you're at than where you came from.
Absolutely.
And then when you're bringing that money back and forth, transferring it back and forth, that's a lot of the problems too. It's like you can have money and you think you have money and you start transferring it, and the percentage you're going to lose on that transfer for currency, if it's over this amount, what are they going to start looking into your finances and taxes and what you need to declare? It can become,
It can be. I mean, there's also FBAR, right? Foreign bank account reporting. So if you have over $10,000 in your foreign bank account on any one day, it's not a taxation thing necessarily, but it's reportable. Then
Right.
you hit on something else that's important, which is, I also have this in the workbook, foreign currency exchange volatility. Most
Right.
US citizens have never even really been near another currency unless it's for vacation. But
Right.
to live and
Yeah.
earn money in another currency,
Yeah.
and you need that money, you need that money to maybe pay your home country. For a
Yeah.
lot of people, that's a big sticker. I meet people in my seminars who don't even know where to go to exchange money. In the workbook, I just added a whole foreign currency list. Some people don't even know what the currency is. They're like, oh, well, it's happened to me. I was in Switzerland. I tried to give somebody euro. I mean, this is when I was a banker.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, I'm in Switzerland. They don't use the euro. What am I doing? So I also have a little example for folks too, so they can see what happens when the currencies move, because people don't realize a lot of times your company pays you in split payroll. Sometimes countries, they don't have a choice. Oh, well, why can't they? I remember someone in the bank saying this to me. Well, why can't they just pay? No, this was in the US. In China, why can't they just pay you in the US dollar? I said, because it's not their currency. Why would they? Why would they? It's not their
Currency.
Unless it's a country, right? There are some countries, in LATAM.
In certain countries, the dollar is the
Right.
actual
Right. Or it is
currency.
widely accepted. Right. It's a part of the Cambodia. I think it's like that. That's different. So that's something that folks don't know. I also have here just like a pre-departure financial checklist. We
Okay.
discussed setting up a consultation with international tax advisor, investment strategy. Let's kind of move on to my other favorite one is credit, right?
Yeah. Now,
U.S.
I mean, that's the thing in France, people don't have credit. Like, it's
Okay.
rare that people have like a credit card, not like the States, like where you get like
Right.
a credit card with $10,000 limit. You can have several of them. People in France in general, I'm making a generalization here, or most of the people that I have experienced don't have credit cards. They
Right.
don't have credit cards. There's no
Well,
credit card lifestyle.
I like that. I'm gonna have to steal that one too. The U.S. definitely has a credit card lifestyle.
Yeah.
And what do foreigners always tell me? And it was actually in part of my research, you Americans are obsessed with your credit score and your credit life. I'm also a credit trained banker by a big bank. I won't say their name. It's all true. It's absolutely true. There are supposed to be some changes coming down. Who knows if that's going to happen?
Right.
Here are a couple of things that people should know. US credit scores and US credit histories don't generally travel. I've heard one or two instances like Canada. People have told me they can ask for your social security number, which I don't understand. It seems like that wouldn't be legal. But anyway, one of the things I advise people to do before you leave the US, get your US credit report. You can go to annual credit report. It's also in the workbook, and you're entitled to one free one a year. And they've changed that because of COVID. You can get them more frequently.
Okay.
The other thing I talk about that goes hand in hand with credit is identity theft. Who's using your identity while you're abroad? It's rampant. So you want to put on maybe a fraud alert. Maybe you want credit monitoring with LifeLock. That's all in the workbook. That's all in the book. There are links to it there. But people should keep it. And also my other people, oh, I'm moving to China. People would say this to me when I would, start interviewing expats. I want a Chinese credit card. I go, why? I said, can you read Chinese? Can you read the application?
Exactly. Can you read the charges?
Right.
Can you read the charges?
Is it tied to what if you can't pay your bill? Let's say you do lose your job, right? Or like me, I was in the hospital for 10 days. Who would be paying my bill, right? And as you alluded to before, the penalties may be harsh. Like in the Middle East, if you don't pay your debt, I heard there are a lot of people in jail. If you don't pay your debts, you can go to jail. I don't know what the credit regime is.
There's some countries, like I say, in France, when it comes to managing money, the banks don't fool around. Like, you can't be messing up your stuff and not knowing what you do. You will not have a bank account. And if you do not have a bank account, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
Zero.
No,
if you do not have a debit card or a card of any fashion, to live is extremely difficult now.
Difficult, right? You really become what we call unbanked.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Another thing,
I just want to address something that we kind of touched on before, because I'm not sure that lots of people know. I didn't know what FACTA was before until I came to France. Right. So I just wanted to touch on what exactly is FACTA, just in case it's the first time people ever heard what FACTA.
Okay, so FACTA, I can't remember how long you're in France, but if I remember, FACTA was fully enacted in 2013 or 2014, but they were talking about it.
Do you know what it stands for, FACTA?
Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act.
Okay.
That's what it stands for. So they would, after the whole UBS debacle and people hiding bank, first of all, Americans have always had to report their bank accounts. It's on I think it's on Schedule B, right?
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, it is. It's on Schedule B.
But they don't tell you. Nobody tells you that. Like, you don't know it until the bank gives you this very long paper with all of this stuff, and you're like, ooh.
Well, that's the thing that FACTA really did, is it really gave the IRS enforcement powers and the ability to work with foreign governments and foreign tax authorities to identify people who are U.S. citizens, U.S. persons. I think entities are included in that. So that's why now when first of all, that's why a lot of banks, especially in Europe, banks have just been like, no. The famous German bank, I think, is the last one, the latest one that had blocked U.S. citizens from opening a bank account. And that's something, I've opened bank accounts overseas. That was something that was not really an issue prior. When FACTA came, because doing all of this the business that I managed in the US, one of them also in banking, was heavily compliant because I had all international customers. It's a full-time job. I understand banks don't want to do it. Some banks in Europe especially have said, well, if you have a certain amount of money, we'll open a bank account for you.
Yeah.
But it's become very onerous. They do ask a lot of questions. I think we discussed before, there's some lawsuits, and most of them are in Europe.
Okay.
Because U.S. citizens, I think, didn't actually give the U.S. government permission to work with the tax authority. And a lot of people feel it's an invasion of privacy.
It does feel a little bit like an invasion of privacy, because if you've changed your residency, you've got nationality in another country now. You've sort of transferred all your money and all your things to another country. Why does the American government still have the right?
Because U.S. citizens are taxed on work, which I understand are taxed on worldwide, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, that's another one we should talk about, don't understand. I mean, I've gotten into arguments, and again, I'm not a CPA, I'm not an accountant, but obviously in banking, finance, I know more than it says it in the back of your passport. And what it is,
it does.
It's a tax filing. Well, as a friend told me who had not filed their taxes in 10 years.
And you have to sign it. You have to sign it also, right?
I don't think you have to sign it, but she made a good point. She was like, well, who reads the back of their passport?
Exactly. I had never read mine until later.
Neither did I, till I was going to China. I had not, luckily that was around the time FACTA. And people don't, that is it
needs to be in the beginning of the passport.
It does.
Yeah, because you don't go to the back of your passport until the last stamp is about to be stamped. Exactly.
Or have a sign in the back or something. So that's a big one. It's a filing requirement, not necessarily a liability requirement. And then there are ways. There's the foreign earned income exclusion, which I also have in here. I have a calendar because there are two tests, and I always forget them, the physical presence test, but the amount of days that you're in a foreign country, right? Mm-hmm. So the calendar allows you to count those many days. But I see a lot of people lately, and I haven't really asked tax accountants this, but a lot of seminars I've sat in on lately, people are taking the foreign tax credit, which is, kind of a dollar for dollar. So I paid $10,000 worth of tax credit, taxes in China, and I'm just going to put that amount on my taxes, just like I used to be able to, on our federal taxes, we could maybe deduct how much we paid in the state. So there are positives to that, but the most important thing is the things that we're discussing. Most people moving overseas don't even know, don't even ask.
You don't think about it because you're thinking about just getting there.
Tell me about it. Right.
Finding a place to live, finding a job, having some money to worry about being taxed. It's like.
Or my other favorite one. Oh, my company will take care of it. My company will take care of it. And since I used to work with a lot of global corporations, I always tell people, do not rely solely on your company. I've met also a lot of expats who work for companies who hired big firms. Big firms make mistakes too.
Sure.
Big firms
and
make mistakes
to be
too.
honest, the laws around taxes and finances and social contribution is changing all the time as well.
It's changing all the time, and we'll probably see more changes. As other people have heard me say this last year, who's going to pay for COVID?
Us.
Right.
Everybody, us. We're going to pay for COVID. I like that.
Right. We're going to pay for COVID. So when I'm seeing people go, oh, I'm moving here and I'm moving there, and it's cheap. So I'm trying lately to just get people to distinguish when they move abroad, myself as well. Is it cheap or is it cheaper?
Yeah.
Right.
Because I was telling you, we were talking a bit about this earlier. I was talking to a woman in her retirement. She had moved to the United States because between the pound and the dollar, it looked like a cheap place to live. But when they got there, their retirement could be taxed. Like all of these things could be taxed. And now in the United States, you're paying for your health care. So
that was
you have a
actually
mortgage payment and healthcare bills from the United
right.
States,
When
like
I
every month.
when I started and this was when I kind of really started getting serious about writing a book, and of course I'm always thinking where I'm going to move to next as well. I didn't really know that much about global tax treaty. I didn't even, to be honest, I didn't even know there were some states. I've heard my parents in retirement complain more about taxes than they ever did.
Sure.
I didn't know some states didn't tax your retirement and Social Security, and I didn't know that some countries will in addition. So if I'm moving to like a Singapore, right? I always use that example, or Hong Kong, they're more expensive countries, right? But they don't tax certain types of income. So I think you need to look at that. And that's the number one question. That's call I was just on. Do they tax retirement income? A lot of foreign countries to make a long story short, don't necessarily recognize the tax advantages of an IRA or those other type of retirement accounts we do, and vice versa, right? The tax person was saying that foreign pensions, which in a lot of countries people don't realize, you have to contribute. I think Germany might be one. I don't want to. You don't have a choice, right? Yeah. It's not like your U.S. Social Security, which I'll talk about that in a second. But in a lot of countries, you don't have a choice. Some countries, China started to do this as I left. I thought Australia did it. Might be changing. If you're an expat and you're only living there like 3 years and you have to pay in, you can get your money back when you leave. You can get your money back. But that's some countries.
You can take your money with you. If
right.
You don't,
because you're not going to retire there. Right. Yeah. You're not going to retire there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another one is U.S. Social Security. Before you leave pre-departure, and I have it on a list, make sure you sign up for your online statement. Okay. And also make sure that you check to see if there's a totalization agreement. Another thing is very complex. With the country you're moving to, just see, right? Because again, you so don't want to be
totalization agreement.
It's just like the global tax treaties. Looks at, so people are not taxed twice on the same income.
Yeah.
Right. So they look at their maybe one country's social insurance contributions. Then they look at the U.S.'s social insurance contributions, Social Securities, and seeing how they work together.
Okay.
Not a lot of countries on there. I think there's 25. I might be wrong. 25.
Wow, that's nothing.
That's nothing. Yeah, there's not a lot of countries. But
I mean, I've been to 35 countries, so that's like 10 over what I.
Yeah, I think it's. Yeah. I want to say it's between. I don't think it's past 30. Yeah, I don't think it's past 30. Wow. I want to say it's like 27, 28. So you want to kind of think about that. And I didn't think about this till I ran into a friend who had lived in Singapore for many years. And she's like, Lisa, I haven't contributed to my U.S. Social Security in years. I'm like, okay, right? So that's how I found out about it. That's how I started thinking about it. So it's something for people to think about. The other one I have down here, another one a lot of people are talking about, and I think they're clamping down, is retaining your U.S. address and your U.S. phone number.
Right.
Okay. So for a lot of these apps, actually, that people are using to trade, right? Not only do you have to be a U.S. citizen, but you have to be domiciled. You have to be they want you to be a U.S. resident because they don't have, right? If you're living in France, they don't have any authorization over there. They may not have any offices over there. And then also sometimes for your banking, since everyone is going to two-factor authentication, right? You need the texting capability, right? Or they want you to have a U.S. address. But you have people like, I'm never coming back. I don't need a U.S. address, or I use Granny's address. Now financial institutions, I have a U.S. financial address. It's not a P.O. box. Do not use a P.O. box because that's not recognizable.
I think can't. Yeah, I didn't
think you can't. You can't. Right. You can't. You basically can't use one. But they say, hey, this is not a residential address, so no, you can't open this type of account. And I'm hearing a lot more people complaining about that. You just need to find one that you can work with. So I have a couple of names that I put in the workbook, and I have a resource guide I'll have in the book. But that's something
Right.
that people, especially when you're starting out being expat, right? We both know never
Yeah.
is a long time, right?
Yeah, it is.
Right. My second time I went to live in England, London, had lived there before. What happened? The biggest financial crisis ever. I was
Yeah.
a banker. Was
Yeah.
I going to be able to continue my career?
And
Well, who
COVID.
knows?
I mean, some
Well,
people
and
like you
COVID.
think you're going to be fine, but then something like this happens and people want to be with their families. They
That's
want to
right.
go home. They want to
That's
be near
right.
their parents or their grandparents or whatever happens. It's like you never know what's going to happen.
What I think there's a name for them. I think some people who come back, it's called boomerang expat. But I agree with you, and I'm glad you brought that up. My other big one is that I have is health insurance is non-negotiable. I've said that before. I said
Mm,
that pre-COVID,
mm,
but now, and I had said this at the very beginning, countries just aren't going to let Americans in. There were already a few countries who were like, you need proof of medical insurance. But
right.
now with these vaccine
Yeah.
passports and
Yeah.
you won't be
Well, yeah,
able
I
to.
mean, because you come to a socialist country, you know, you just can't. You have to have some sort of regulation around, or the country will be bankrupt. You know, it's
Oh,
just like,
absolutely,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely. And that was again digital nomads. A lot
yeah.
of these countries, Thailand, Bali.
Mm,
I predicted, and it's happening. They would be among the first countries who would start to institute because people are there in mass. They
sure,
would be among the first countries to institute digital nomad visas and
mm,
health insurance requirement. It's also a way of tracking people now with COVID,
sure,
right?
sure.
And a source of revenue, right? What do I always say to people with all these digital nomad visas? Beware, these countries don't love you, they love your money,
Sure.
right? But it's a way of tracking it, which I kind of agree
It's
with.
normal.
Expats come and right to developing countries and some what's the word we want to use, gentrify, right?
Well,
Next
and
thing,
also, people
yeah,
go there for the benefits of that country, but the country should also benefit from your presence. It shouldn't
good
be
point.
just coming and taking and
Right.
and then putting it all somewhere else. I mean, out of
No,
respect
that's
for being
true.
allowed to come to live there, enter the culture, make your money there, build a life there, you should be contributing to the community, to
Yeah,
the country, and to the environment. So I think that's perfectly.
I agree with you. I agree. I mean, I think it was getting a little, no one wanted COVID to happen, but it was getting rampant in some of these countries, and I can see we're putting some controls and some crackdown. But the health insurance is a really big one. You mentioned Europe. I used to say when I used to live in Europe with my friends, my salary was lower, but I had a better quality of life. And one of the reasons is like this woman told you, you're not nickel and dimed all the time with the whole
Yeah,
tipping and everything.
yeah, yeah.
And then healthcare is already, there's
Well, in France, I
certain things
can I
people are
can
willing to
tell
pay
you
for.
the standard of living of most people is very good. I mean, even I've seen people who what is called in France SDF is sans domicile, which is without a home. They still
Mm.
have a health card. They
Mm.
can still go to the doctor. They can get, if they have mental issues, anything, they can still be seen to and cared for and treated like a human being. In the United States, oh my God, if you see some of the stories of how they treat people who don't have,
Or you can go bankrupt.
or
You
you go
could,
bankrupt.
yeah, you could, which when I told people when I was in Asia, I taught executive students, we would, and most of my students were from the healthcare industry,
Mm,
actually. So I had a lot of doctors and the big, pharmaceutical companies. So we would talk about this often about which model China should follow. Should they follow the
right.
European model? Should they follow the US model? And I'd say, people go bankrupt when they can't pay their medical bills. I think I was on a Clubhouse a couple of weeks ago. She said it best. She's moving to Portugal. She said, I want to move to a country where people have taken the money out of the medicine. And I
Sure.
can
And
totally, Yeah,
No,
I could
yeah.
totally agree with that. I know you can, living in
Well,
France.
no,
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to a doctor who's actually going to be doing my knee surgery here in France, and he was talking about a country where there were more knee surgeries than there were people. So this is where
Mm,
the medical this is where medicine is about money and not about care. He said
mm,
the thing about socialist systems is that your doctor, he is not going to become a millionaire off of you. So he's
yeah.
thinking about your care. He's not going to prescribe you unnecessary surgeries, which will tax and drain the system because the system controls what can be done. And if it's something that's outside of the social system care, you have your private,
Right,
insurance to take care of that. But
right.
he said the difference in a socialist country is the doctors do not look at you as a financial payday. And that
So
and but
sad.
that's huge.
And that is huge, and it's very sad. It's huge, and it's very, very sad, and it's a driver for it's a driver for a lot of people. I mean, I've been on both. Like I said, I've lived in Europe. Obviously, I live in the U.S., and I've been sick in China. A 10-day stay was mid
Sure.
five figures, right? Now, luckily, I kept up with insurance, and it was an emergency, so my insurance paid for it. But
Yeah.
it's still like my cousin said to me the other day. We were joking around. She says, "Well, Lisa, unfortunately, I've got to go to work because they pay for my insurance." And I'm thinking, when are we going to get away from this business model? Like,
Yeah.
you're looking for a job, and it has to be driven by your insurance. When are we going to get away from this model? I don't know. I don't know. I
Well,
I
I mean, as
think,
long as I think that people, and I mean, and I'm guilty of this. You go and it clicks, it says, "Do you want insurance?" And you click no because it's that extra like $5 or
well, yeah, of course, of
$20. And
course.
then if you get to where you're going and something actually happens to you, you're gonna wish you paid that $30 to take care of whatever it is, because the thing is you never know when you're gonna get sick. You never know when an accident is gonna happen. You
Yeah.
never know what's gonna happen. And if you don't have insurance, it's always gonna cost you more in the back end.
Oh, that's right. That's right. And
Yeah.
going to your point, a lot of expats also didn't come home because they don't have insurance in the US. Maybe they wanted to be with their families, or as you said, anything could happen. But I read a lot of expats say, "I don't have insurance in the US, so I'm not coming home." And that's that. But a lot of these insurance policies, you add the US onto them, and they're expensive. I mean, I'm trying to do I'm committed to doing a Clubhouse, a Facebook Live. I'll let you know when. I'll let people know when, on insurance, because insurance, these travel insurance companies, which I said years ago were on the sketch side, they got a lot of flack because as people tried to come home, and as people who live a
Okay.
global lifestyle tried to use it, they
It was
found if they got COVID, right, it wasn't usable. So you
right.
also see the other trend, and we can move on after this, is cancellation for any reason has become very, very popular, because people are like, "I'll pay for it." No, if I get sick,
Yeah.
like with COVID or something, I don't care. I want cancellation for any reason. So
Right.
I had shared an article where that is like one of the most popular types of insurance. I'm just looking through my list to see if there's anything
I
else.
mean, we've covered a lot. Like,
Yeah,
I think
that
that
is a lot.
it just to summarize, people need to be thinking about banking. If the country has a, what did you call it? A total
Okay,
something agreement,
so totalization agreement is for social
totalization agreement.
insurance. That's for social insurance.
Okay.
And then you're talking about a global tax treaty
Treaty.
with that covers all kind of everything else. So
Okay.
often you'll find for retirement accounts, some countries I've seen, they're pretty thin. Some
Yeah.
are pages and pages, but that
Right.
kind of covers taxation or everything else. And some countries don't have them, so they're open to interpretation. So you need to know that. That's the basic. But again, get a tax consultation before you leave,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or as soon
And
as
it's
you
these
land.
things that like we like try, like we're like, oh, well, I don't want to pay $200 and $300 for that. But like I say, if you don't do it on the front end, You're going to pay more on the back end. It's always going to cost you more. If you make a mistake with your taxes, with your declaration, you find out that now these people have the right to a percentage of your money. It's like, this is stuff you need to take, a small piece of time to get a consultation, to know what you're getting yourself into when you're moving to another country. If you do have funds, you're going to be moving, trading, exchanging, living off of, because there's also rules on it. It changes after you've been in a place after a certain amount of time.
Yeah, 5 years, usually, 5 year rule.
And do not take opening a bank account for granted. It is not easy everywhere.
Yeah, it's not something that sometimes it can. What I always tell people, if they're going to do like if your company, let's say, sending you abroad, they send you a look-see trip, right, where you go to kind of check things out, go into the banks and ask them for their documentation checklist. Right, okay. Sometimes your company, or start asking friends what are some banks, if you can't visit the bank while you're sitting in your hotel room, look, and also, again, we always used to say, why are you going abroad? I have that in here. What's your intention for going abroad?
Right.
The days when we could kind of go abroad, and I've been doing this over 25 years, and hang out, not so much. Not so much. Countries want to know, what are you doing here? What are your intentions? So you going to work, study, live. And let me just say something about work, because I get a lot of questions. Oh, my company said I could work anywhere. Really? Does your company have offices in that country? Are you in cybersecurity or some other thing where if you lose your computer or someone hacks it, or you're not allowed to take your computer to another country? People need to. I've counseled a lot of people, like, my company said I can work anywhere. Most companies now have started to have a remote work policy. Ask them about it before you book your plane ticket to Marseille or somewhere.
No, I mean, I know a lot of like technicians and things like that who work from home, and they can't just be anywhere. They have to be in a secured,
right,
because the systems that they're working on is secured systems, and those type of jobs want to make sure that where they're, because data privacy rules are not the same everywhere, or what the government has the right to see and not to see and to do and what to do is not the same everywhere.
That's very true.
Transferring this information is not agreeable to every company. For you to be in a country where the government may have more of a dictatorial status over people than you would somewhere else.
I remember there was a time when I was a banker, mostly this was Asia, and we'd get a printout from the security office, and they go, "You're taking your laptop there? Is this your primary laptop? Are you taking it there?"
I don't travel with my laptop most of the time.
Yeah, a lot of countries now are taking deep dives. A lot of countries
they can confiscate it at the airport and look through it.
Look through it and ask you to see if you're doing any work. It's not even a security, but are you sure you're not going to be working here? This happened to me before COVID, going through Indonesia. Luckily, I was going through conferences and I could prove that. No one ever really talks about this stuff. They just go, "Oh, you'll be a digital nomad, be an expat, and I can work anywhere." And then also always think, I see people going, "Well, I don't want to tell my company." You get into trouble and you're working and your company doesn't have any office there. They don't have any representation, no legal. You're on your own.
Yep.
Right. And then if your boss didn't know you were there. So I think people need to think about that. But we did talk about a lot.
And I thank you so much for sharing.
No, I thank you I love having these conversations with you.
Yeah, and just enlightening us all and giving, all of us, you've given me lots of things to think about also. So, I know it's important to share that information, if people are thinking about moving abroad, and even if you are abroad and you got money back home and your Social Security was all paid into another country, but now you're thinking about staying in this country, all insurance, what that means if you're coming to study, to live for a couple of years or anything like that. So I think these are important questions that people just need to think about so that their experience can be as smooth as possible.
Absolutely. And there's always going to be bumps, but but now I always say to people in my seminars, two biggest things: immigration, which now with digital nomad visas and remote work, it's less of an issue. The second one is your money.
Yeah.
Is your finances. Right. And
money is freedom.
You took a quote that I have in a workbook. There's one about the money. It has. It's about freedom.
Yeah, money is freedom, though.
So that's it. People can go to livingagloballifestyle.com. There's a sticky button at the top, which
so when is your next workshop popping off?
I'm gonna have 2, and I will send you the information. Last month wasn't so great because it was just really busy and had 2 people pass away from COVID. So I'm gonna do what I do is I usually do a free one, which is just about living abroad. Okay. And then I have I'm gonna do 2 paid financial ones this month.
Okay.
So I usually do them on a
Sunday.
Sunday.
Find that on your site. If you send it to me, I'll share it as well.
Yes, I will send it to you. But yes, there is one of the choices is for events. I use Eventbrite. It takes you right there. I post all my events on Eventbrite right now. And then people can join my group, Living a Global Lifestyle. I'm going to be doing a lot more there, a lot more lives and things like that. Okay. And but if you go to the website, it's right at the top and it takes you to the jump page so you can see the description. Okay. If you don't want to buy right now, please sign up for the email list so I can let you know, and I'll be sending out a newsletter.
How much is your workshop?
The workshops, usually they're over $100, between $100 and $150. I update the content for every workshop, so it's a little bit different. But I always do a free one. The free one covers money and everything. Okay. And then at the end, obviously, I say, well, if you want this very detailed, and the workbook is right now 130 pages. I'll try not to make it longer, and it's $37. But it is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I'm going to get one. I'm going to get one.
Thank you. It's $37.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
After you get one, people let me know, info@Living a Global Lifestyle, what else they'd like to see. It's been great because you and I have really talked about a lot of the topics that people have been asking me about.
Yeah, nice.
And that I see in all the expat groups keep coming up and up again.
Right.
I love this because I just don't have any time to write about it. I swear that,
yeah.
I just don't.
That's all of us,
I just don't have. I just don't have time to write about it. So I like being able to get on and speak about it. So thank you for that. And I'm going to set up our clubhouse either for this month or beginning of May.
We could talk about that after this. We'll just so we'll say goodbye to everybody. I hope this was helpful. And if you have any extra questions for Lisa or for me, you can always leave them in the comments below and we'll try to address them as much as we can. Okay, bye.